because the
Okay.
way that they are taught to think about the entire job search, that process, the interview process, is just like
Cutting edge.
astronomical. Yeah, it's cutting edge, but it's an astronomical difference between
Okay.
how mass MS or even like MA, which was that economics degree that I did,
Mhm.
which is how they are taught.
Welcome, everybody. I am Ruben, and you are listening to After the Master, a weekly podcast in which I talk to people primarily from the international student community who have recently earned a master's degree from globally leading programs and are now on the path to achieving their professional goals. My guests delve into their experiences and highlight their mistakes, learnings, and realizations, which I am sure will help you move closer to your career goals. I post a new episode every week, so please subscribe to receive updates. If you would like to listen to this episode, please see the description for a link to your favorite app and stick around till the end to gain as much as possible. I would love to hear from you, so please connect with me through the link in the description. In this episode, Tara shares how she slowly settled in the masters as it felt like a big shift. She reveals a few major mistakes and also gives some mind-blowing career and life advice. She holds an MS in Natural Resources and Environment and an MA in Applied Economics, both from the University of Michigan and Arbor.
Okay. Hi, Tara. How are you?
Doing well. How are you, Ruben?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'm really happy that I'm getting to do this with you.
Likewise.
So, Tara, to start with, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so my name is Tara Narayanan. I'm currently working at Bloomberg NEF in the US. It's a research and market analytics provider. So, Bloomberg, the parent company, is known for having media services as well as providing financial services. So, a lot of people mentally associated with like journalism, finance, and so on. But within their many services, one of the things that they do is own this sort of team of researchers called Bloomberg NEF that work on the overall sustainability transition. So, what that group does is track all of the different ways in which decarbonization is happening across different sectors, power, transport, finance and investments, materials, oil and gas, and so on. And talk about what that means for businesses and what that means for companies' profits and so on. If not exactly profits, it's more like uh, what is the strategy that companies should be going to if they want to keep in line with decarbonization. And within that, as you can imagine, there's like a lot more subcategories that breaks down into. One of the categories is solar, and the sort of where categories intersect with geography is where I work. So I work on US solar.
All right. And Tara, you were with me at the University of Michigan, right? You were in at that time, the Natural Resources and Environment program. But you also chose to do a dual MS, or was it an MA in
It was an
economics,
MA.
right?
Yeah.
It was an MA in economics. So, can you talk a little bit about why you chose sustainability, for your masters, and also why you chose to do economics as well?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was applying to grad school, I was applying at that point after like a couple of years in general, where throughout my undergrad, when I had started off in my bachelor's degree, it was like I joined bachelor's. I don't need to know about life or anything. But around halfway through, I started thinking, oh, I should like have some direction for my future. I feel like I'm halfway done. Like, shouldn't I know where to even go? And around that time, I took a class called non-conventional energy sources. So
Mhm.
in general, I was like, oh, renewable energy. This is something that I could actually working environment, I want to do it. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to like save the world somehow. And so I started generally doing internships and things to try and get to ultimately being qualified enough to work in this vague idea of saving the world somehow with renewable energy, which is why it, like, over the course of time, it made sense to apply for a grad school or a master's program that would at least help me be more well-rounded in my understanding and certain things. So that's why I applied to natural resource environment at the University of Michigan.
Okay.
I applied to a bunch of colleges, but Michigan was among the places that accepted me. And once I got there, focusing on sustainable energy systems and so on, I realized that Michigan actually had more opportunities than I uh, was able to really appreciate when I applied, because I'd kind of known that they encourage interdisciplinary stuff, but what they really encouraged was students taking advantage of the fact that you can take courses at another department on the same campus. You still have to apply to that other department,
Yeah.
but they really encouraged it by saying, okay, you can like count one or two of your classes here to that program as well, so we support that. And so among the different options that I had, I knew that economics was something that really, coming from an engineering background, I was kind of clueless about. I'd taken some like introductory economics classes that were part of the whole sustainability program. Just the way it was set up, they kind of believed in giving you an introduction to ecology, an introduction to economics, an introduction to sort of like, and I'm blanking on the word, but social sciences, let's call it
Yes.
that.
Understood.
And so taking that class made me realize there's a lot that I don't understand. Why don't I apply for an economics degree as well? If I have the opportunity, I can learn a lot more. So that's why I did that.
Just a quick word, if you are planning to apply to graduate programs abroad, I offer several services and I am working on a bunch of resources to help you breeze through the applications process. You'll find all of these on my website rbnedu.com, and links have been provided in the description. All right, back to the episode.
That that brings back a lot of memories, especially when you said that, yeah, I want to change the world. And I also kind of came in with a very similar mindset. But you had some work experience, right, before you came?
Exactly. So because I did that 1 year of work experience, because I'd applied to grad school in the final year of my bachelor's as well. Because at that point in time, when you have a general vague idea of what you want out of life, but not a clear idea of what your next step is, I was applying for jobs while also like thinking maybe I should apply for masters. But at that point in time, all the masters I was applying for were engineering, right? Because
Okay.
if you graduate in engineering, that's all you know. You're like, that's it. So luckily, working for 1 year was very useful in like shaking that illusion away that I don't need to necessarily continue to do like engineering as such, and I should actually focus on things that will teach me the stuff that I don't know. So
That's actually a lot of people I spoke to as part of this, and also otherwise. Most of them really liked the work. I mean, they thought that the work experience they had before uh, joining a master's program helped them eventually at some point, whether it is more clarity or whether it is, instead of something that you want to do, there is something that you don't want to do, at least.
that's
So yeah, so I think having some work experience, whether it is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is pretty useful, especially once you're entering the industry again after your masters, right?
very much it. For me, it was a lot more useful to just lose some of the perceptions of being in college, because generally when you're in college, bachelor's, it's like all you've ever done in your life is be in school. And in general, people tell you like, oh, you do this project, you get these marks. There are very standardized set of evaluation criteria, and you're also told that if you meet these evaluation criteria, you'll do well. You're also told things like um, research and core skills, that's the most important thing. But once you start working, you realize that there's a certain that real life doesn't work that way. The skills that are actually valued are not necessarily the skills that college is focused on teaching you. For
Very
example,
true.
like your like engineering skills, for example, sure, they are very useful, but if you're going to dedicate your whole career to building upon that, you're probably going to go into research and development. But 90% people are not. So just that shaking that illusion that like, oh, this is the skill, this is the only thing in life that's important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of perceptions,
Yeah.
did you have a certain perception of what your career would be like after you complete the master's program? Did you have any such thoughts? Were you in touch with alumni or people in the industry before you went to the US?
Yeah. So did I have a perception? Did I try to inform my perception?
Yes.
Um, Good question. Not really.
Okay.
So among the things that, so I think, that there are some people who like take advice and plan their future and so on.
Yes. Bhuvan did that.
Bhuvan did that.
He spoke in detail about all the things that he did before he came to the US, and as soon as he reached there, he was using LinkedIn extensively throughout.
He was intense. Like he was doing
He
all
was
sorts of
intense.
things that in hindsight, I was like, why did I not do any of this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Please edit this out of this interview. But my point is, that like, because there were times when I'd look at Bhuvan and be like, why is he jumping around so much in first year? But in hindsight, that was the thing to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I also, once I started living with him, I was seeing him do, contact so many people, and all the time, he was always of the opinion that you have to be shameless, you have to talk to people, and he spoke about that in the episode as well. But yeah, coming back to your thoughts on
I was also his roommate for some point in time, and I was very relieved when he finally got a job, because everything that I was applying for, I'm sure he would apply. He's also more qualified than me, bloody fellow. Very relieved. Now you get out of my way. You got a job, get out. So anyway, so what the perceptions that I had about what I would do after masters or what to even do during masters were very vague,
Okay.
half-baked, and uninformed.
Okay.
Because I had no idea of specifics. I had just vague ideas. Um, I didn't make as much of an effort to talk to alumni because, in a way, I did not have a full conception of the fact that I was going to be studying for 2 years, which eventually became 2.5. But I didn't have a sense that 2 years will go by really quickly. And this is a program which is at a slightly higher level and is meant to allow you to sort of change direction or to grow faster in your chosen field. It's meant to be a little more geared towards, professional outcomes, as opposed to a bachelor's where, you have more time and there's more time to just be clueless. And so coming in a little, so if you don't spend time networking or talking to alumni or trying to see where you want to go at the end of your bachelor's, that's fine. You have time.
Yeah.
It's also just a bachelor's. Like people are more forgiving. And I didn't do that in my master's. So I should probably have talked to more alumni, which that's something that I only started doing in my second year on.
Okay. All right, Tara. So when you joined the program at Michigan, were there a couple of things that you focused on doing from the perspective of, say, getting an internship or working towards securing some sort of employment later?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a very mixed response, because I think the best way to describe like the first few days of joining a grad program is to sort of split it up into two things. One is, what you're there to learn and what you end up actually learning, because you're going to take classes. You're going to have all of these experiences, like meeting new people, getting their ideas. And the second is the effort that you put in during your program to prepare for after the program, which is job related, career related, building up a resume, you've got this opportunity and so on.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who were smarter about this, where they on day one realized that these two things have to happen in parallel.
Mm.
I was not that clear because my thought process was that I've come to this program in order to change a little bit the direction that I'm in order to learn something new. And therefore, that new thing that I'm going to learn is what I have to offer to a potential employer or so on. And so, going to job fairs or something like that, when I was literally 1 month or 2 months into classes, I can understand you have to go talk to people and so on. But what it actually meant, what I was supposed to do, just did not make sense to me at all. Because I was like, what am I telling them? I've taken 2 months worth of classes and I'm saying, hi, I'm interested in an internship or whatever. Like, what do I have to offer? And this was the kind of thinking that actually did not, which to some extent held me back a little bit because it stopped me from really putting myself out there and saying, what does your company do? I'm really interested. And to talk about things in terms of this is what I have, this is what I am currently doing. And, I'm interested in these things and I'll probably be good enough by the time summer comes around later. That thought process I didn't have at all. So I didn't do much to really make an extra effort to find internships and so on, apart from what was already coming through the university's sort of careers office.
Yes.
So
at what point did you kind of get a sense, of this is what I need to do? And let's talk about the internship that you managed to find, which was at the UN in Vienna. So how did you approach, or what helped you get that internship? And kind of, yeah.
So to be honest, I had been applying for a lot of internships and I had really average success.
Okay.
I had like a couple of interviews, but I hadn't made it through. I was applying, but I wasn't necessarily hearing back. It was the time of year when all students everywhere were just trying to apply for internships. This one actually came through the university, where there was an alumni of the university. I think he graduated in 1970s or something.
Okay.
Who had retired from that UN department.
I see.
And he was doing his part to try and promote opportunities at that UN department among people in his, alma mater where he had graduated from. So he had flagged that expressly, and that sort of flagging from him helped sort of promote the overall sort of application and so on from to the people who are doing some of the recruitment. And so that's really that sort of that helped me a little bit. So because among all of the students who applied, then they were like, okay, fine, let's hire Tara. But I realized afterwards that once I joined the UN, it's really competitive. They get thousands of applicants because it has name recognition. And so it's really hard to make it through. And so any sort of, the other issue is that it's not funded. So the UN doesn't pay their interns. So they always feel a little guilty about just hiring people randomly from another country because they do not know if they can support them. So because in this position, this long ago alumni had said, I'll help, and the university said that they'd help to provide some financial support.
So that kind of helps.
That kind of helped. And I noticed that some of the other interns who were there also had some sort of financial backing. For example, there were some Korean interns whose government had created a program saying, okay, we'll support you to do this sort of unpaid internship. It's good experience abroad.
Yeah.
There was a fellowship program at their end, I think.
Okay. So do you think the second degree, the MA in economics, helped you at some point when you were applying for jobs later on?
Very much so. So at the end of my first semester, I decided to go ahead and apply for the applied economics program. And I applied and they accepted me and so on. Part of that was motivated by just this sense, either rightly or wrongly, that when I was going out and applying for jobs, saying that I have a degree in natural resources and environment with a focus in sustainable energy took a lot of time to say. And not only did it take a lot of time to say, by the time I finished saying what I was studying, people were not really going to click and make that connection, because they would hear natural resources I'd assume that like I wanted to hug trees or something, you know. And this obviously was just my own perception because I was not getting traction and so on. So I thought it definitely helps to have a degree with more recognizability. I was also interested in economics because I didn't know that coming in. I thought it was might as well take the classes and get like a better academic foundation. But it definitely helped, for example, in my current job, where after I joined, I realized a lot of the people around me actually had an economics background.
Okay.
And the sense also was that from recruiters, that they were not necessarily going to go out and look for people who had like my bachelor's experience, for example, engineering, because they automatically thought that if somebody has gone to all the trouble to study engineering, they want to continue working in that. And so my people like me who were like, I have done this, but I'm hoping to shift, would not necessarily have stood out in the radar of that recruiter. But my economics degree actually did. On the other hand, the natural resources program, which is what I really cared about, which really taught me a lot that I, to some extent, and gave me the background for my current role, would not have stood out, at least with these recruiters. They did not necessarily know to go looking for that.
So in the second year, sometime probably in the last couple of semesters, I believe you had started looking for jobs, and there were career fairs in the university, in our department, other departments. So what was your approach like when you were thinking about, man, I need to get a job now, or I need to find a job now?
Yeah, so I was I knew I had a little bit of time because I was doing 2 degrees at the same time. I had 2.5 years to graduate.
Okay.
And so the second summer, I was looking for an internship or some sort of temporary work, and so I knew I had a little more time trying to actually find a job. But in my final semester, when the clock is ticking, you're about to graduate and you need to find a job, a lot of the mentality was just try and apply to as many things as possible, try and network and reach out and so it really was okay, now's the time, like everything that you've learned over the last 2 years, you have one final semester to really see if you can connect, make an impression, get a job.
So you were just applying to positions that were on LinkedIn or on online portals. Is that mainly what you were doing?
So mainly what I was doing was like simply searching for open jobs on LinkedIn, trying to find companies that I could get a sense of as having, working in some sort of sustainability, renewable energy kind of field. Talking to alumni and seniors to say, where do you work? What is your company like? Do you have openings? And if I found openings at a company, I would reach out to people in that and say, by the way, there's an opening. So there's this sort of like endless cycle of like, find a job, try to network, talk to somebody, connect, learn about it, and then, go back and like repeat that over and over again. Sometimes when I would talk to people, I would ask them for like information about the specific role. Sometimes I would just ask them about like advice in general. And in some cases, I would just tell them like, tell me about what this company actually does. Because sometimes people will get back to you and be honest and tell you like, look, I understand you're interested in this role. You're a student about to graduate. We have an open role. I see where this is going. I am not involved with this decision. Don't pitch yourself to me. But then I would still find it useful to have a conversation about like, but what is useful to me and so on. Those conversations kind of had mixed results because in some cases, I would feel like I was talking to somebody who like was like, oh, wow, yeah, very interesting talking to you. Why don't you apply? And so on. And then I wouldn't hear back from them. Or I would apply and then I would get rejected by the automated system.
Okay.
So it's a lot of hang in there
mentality. When you were trying to connect with people, alumni or current staff at wherever you wanted to work at, how were the responses like largely? Like what were people usually helpful, or Would they kind of, ghost you after a point? What was it like?
Yeah. I'd say if you've managed to get through to somebody and they're like, yeah, sure,
Hmm.
I'll set up a call and we can talk,
Hmm.
then they are helpful. Um,
Hmm.
but that's the minority. The majority
Okay.
of people you reach out to saying, hi, I'm a student, would just love to chat with you, are not going to respond. And that makes sense because they get a lot of these requests.
So towards the end, what do you think actually helped you get through to the job at Bloomberg?
Yeah, so towards the end of my job search, I think there are two things that helped.
Okay.
And the first one I had no idea was even a thing at that time, and that was sort of timing. A lot of jobs open up in
Hmm.
January,
I
and so
was
November, December is a really quiet period where everyone's just wrapping up the year. No one is really like actively trying to schedule interviews or anything like that. And that's the time that I was graduating. So I was like, wow, I'm just never going to find a job. But in January, a lot more roles opened up, and that's something that I didn't realize at the time.
okay.
The second thing was just like a real stroke of luck, which is like basically LinkedIn and like opening it every day and trying to see who's posting what. Because there was an analyst from my current team, the person who had this role that I
Hmm.
currently have,
Hmm.
who was leaving, who had said, uh, hey, this role is open, please apply. And his colleague had shared it.
Hmm.
And that person was a connection of my roommate who had liked it. And so 3 levels removed, somebody had shared a post that
Hmm.
came to
On
my
your feed.
newsfeed. And I reached out to that guy saying, you have no idea who I am, but I'm interested in your post. Will you please talk to me? And so
Hmm.
he said, okay, yeah. And at the end of talking to him, I asked him a couple of questions that hopefully, potentially in hindsight, maybe click. And he said, when you apply for the role, you can list my name as someone
Hmm.
who has recommended you for it, because they
Hmm.
usually have that option in the bottom of the form being like,
Okay.
are any of our employees
Yeah. Yeah.
recommending you? So I'm
Right.
pretty sure that helped a recruiter actually see my resume and call me back instead of just ignoring it with the millions.
So it seems like, there are two broad approaches that uh, people focus on. One is sit on, the computer, go through 30, 40, 50 jobs, apply to some of them. And of course, uh, a lot of people are trying to network at the same time through events or through LinkedIn, whatever. But the thing that seems to work for most people is some sort of connection within the company. So a referral basically, right? Whether you have to put it in the form actually or whether it happens internally, this person recommends you to the recruiter or whatever. So it seems like the second approach can cut your search time by a lot.
And your overall heart pain.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you said that it was kind of a bit of that luck maybe luck maybe played some role in helping you out, but
Yeah, it played a big part, because what if I hadn't opened it that day and seen this,
true.
person
Right.
liking as a post of somebody else? What
Yeah.
if that guy hadn't responded to me? So
Yeah.
very humbling overall, like the sheer randomness of it.
And would you say, and there is this kind of probably misconception that if you graduate around the December, November time, basically a lot of people enter programs during they opt for the spring intake, right? So
Yeah.
if you think about the timeline, they usually end the program, whether it mostly 2-year programs or 1-year programs, they will graduate in December, right? But most people usually opt for the fall intake and graduate in May or April, right? So do you
Yeah.
think there are any differences in terms of availability of jobs because uh, you have that experience?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think from like a company and a recruiter's point of view, they are probably going to respond to the fact that the majority of the people they are trying to hire, if they are aiming for new grads, will be available to start working around April or May.
Mm.
And so, sort of, when a lot of roles open up in January and they're going through that entire process, they are mentally thinking this is the final semester for the regular fall graduates who
Mm.
will be available by April.
Mhm.
And December, just conceptually, because it's the end of the year, everyone's sort of wrapping up, right?
Right.
But if you're a spring cycle student who is graduating in December, what you'll find is that you're then part of the same pool as all of the other regular students. So you will also then find yourself still going through that entire job search process in January.
Okay.
In case a company wants someone to start working immediately, then they're like, we need somebody in February, then probably that's an advantage to you.
Yeah.
But I guess from a mental preparedness point of view, it's more likely that you'll graduate and then a whole bunch of things will open up
Okay.
and then you'll apply.
Makes sense. So in retrospect, I mean, you definitely spoke about some of the things that you think you could have done better. But if there was one, major piece of advice that you wish you had received probably before starting the program at Michigan, or sometime in the early stages of it, what would that be?
So the high level thing is to I'm going to say this like a sort of like life advice also, which is to listen more carefully.
Okay.
And the sort of like follow on from that is talk to more people. So
Yeah.
talk to more people and then listen to what they have to say more carefully and see really how much of it can be applicable to you. Because I really could have because at the end of my first year, the end of my first internship, I felt like some of the confidence that I did not have when I joined, I had taken classes, I had actually done some work. So then I suddenly found myself being able to actually, reach out to people on LinkedIn and say like, hi, all I want is advice. This is what I've done so far. This is what I understand. This is the kind of work that I'm not sure I want to do. Tell me about your job. What kind of place I should apply for? So my overall ability to communicate was a lot higher. But
Okay.
in hindsight, I could have done that at the beginning also. I could have said, this is what I want to do. And I'm going to be honest, here's all the stuff I don't know. Can you guide me? And I need not have worried so much about being honest. I think there's a difference between being like, hey, I don't know anything. Give me everything on a silver platter. Give me advice. Give me knowledge. And saying, look, I'm trying, but I don't know. Whatever you say, it will be helpful for me. So I could have talked to people more, even when I did not know.
Right. And I think that would also, I mean, the sustainability, renewable energy, these fields are not something that students usually learn in their bachelor's, or even jobs here are probably not. I mean, there would be probably a handful of solid sustainability oriented jobs.
Because a bachelor's is meant to teach you sort of
The
fundamentals.
basics, yeah, fundamental.
And like engineering or economics or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas going to work in a field that's going to be largely interdisciplinary like this is not something you can learn.
Yeah. And I think what you said, I mean, it would probably apply to a lot of people who are kind of switching fields or moving to probably something that they may not have had experience with.
Yeah, and so don't get me wrong. When I say it's not something you can learn, I mean that the specific thing is not going to be taught to you. You can definitely learn
exactly, of course.
Get a job and like learn your way through it. You also said like, what is one piece of advice? And unfortunately, I feel the motivation to give you a second one, which for me personally was, don't overthink things.
Okay.
So I really thought that, I should be sort of focused. I should have something to say. And so when I joined and I was not sure necessarily of what to do, I didn't do what some other, like, I didn't do this thing where I said, okay, let me just, this is my academic advisor who's been appointed. Let me just find some sort of research project to do on the side with him, which I don't fully understand. Let me just do it. Start doing something. And that will help me build up like a little bit of experience. It'll, along with my classes, it will be something that I'm doing that would add to my overall, broader goals of changing direction.
Yes.
I spent some time overthinking like, oh, but if I sign up for this, without fully knowing whether it is part of my broader goals. Would that be pointless? Would that be wrong? And instead of doing that, I should have just signed up
Done
for
it.
something.
Yeah.
By the time this hit me a couple of months in, one of my first like on-campus research jobs was in food systems, right? And this has absolutely nothing to do with the renewable energy that I came in saying that I wanted to do, but I did it because it was paying me, it was helpful, and it was a really useful experience, just as part of do something, don't overthink.
Correct.
It's not
Definitely.
related to your field, fine.
Yeah. I think just taking that initiative can work in ways that you may never have imagined. And in some of the other episodes, things like this have happened, with people. They started doing something, but without probably worrying about whether this will actually lead to where I want to be. But at some point, it kind of tends to work out. Right. And the second kind of, advice related question that I wanted to ask you is for people who want to enter the renewable energy and sustainability space in general, whether it is, in a role that uh, is closely related to yours, which is market research, or whether it is something else in the space. What is it that you think recruiters look for in candidates? And how can candidates maximize their chances of getting through to such jobs?
Yeah. One thing that definitely helps is if you have a little bit of experience in specifically, say, renewable energy, if that's what you're applying for. So some sort of experience in that specific thing. If you've either done like a project that you can highlight, or
Yes.
an internship, um, anything that because everyone does coursework, but doing something a little bit apart from coursework, even projects that you can highlight and say, look, I have a working knowledge of at least the terminology, a little bit of stuff that means that when I join your company, I'm not going to be starting from zero. I'll at least be starting from step 1 or step 2. That sort of thing definitely helps. But I think what also helps is to be a little more confident in saying these are all my in having your entire experience, and saying this is all of the stuff that I have done.
Okay.
And I have different skills that have come potentially from different places, but you know what? I'm going to be able to apply all of them to this particular role. And so in a weird way, I would say it's assuming that you have, a resume that like a lot of people who graduate from a master's where they've done some internships, they've done projects, and they're able to build all of that out. They may have work experience in the past. I would say what's really useful is being able to take all of that together and tie together to say this is how it will actually fit your current job description. So whether that is on a resume, certain keywords that make it sound more like you're tailored to that role, or in your cover letter, like explaining that, or just in an interview being able to say like I'm able to put together what I have. I think that helps. Aside from a hint that you are not a candidate starting from zero in renewable energy.
Definitely. And there was one more thing I wanted to ask you, Amay. A lot of master's programs offer, say, the option to do a thesis or a master's project or just, coursework. So in Bhuvan's episode, he said that the thesis that he did, the thesis work, really helped him a lot because it gave him a lot of specialized knowledge, which in his experience was quite useful when he was looking for jobs. But you did not choose to do a thesis. You did a master's practicum, correct? Which was one of the options that we had in Michigan. And I think similar options are available in other programs. So what was your experience like with the practicum, and did it help you at some point?
Yeah, so my practicum Unlike Bhuvan, whose thesis was very specialized and I would argue directly led to his getting his job, my practicum was actually not related to my role at all.
Okay.
Actually, in one of the final rounds of the interview for my current role,
Mm.
I had described this practicum in great detail. The interviewer said, "Wow, it seems like you like really care about this topic, but the role that you're applying for is very different from what you've worked on. So are you
Mm.
sure you want to work on this?" And I panicked. I was like, "Oh my god, no. Please consider me seriously. This is one thing that I did, but I've done other things also."
Mm.
And so I guess some context would be that my practicum was related to um, solar microgrids in UP, Uttar Pradesh,
Mm.
in India. And that was very different from what I'm currently working on.
Mm.
The word solar appears in both places, but that's kind of it,
Mm.
because this deals entirely with like large systems that are built out in like the middle of the desert somewhere. It's US based, so the geography is different, the scale of what you're talking about is different, everything's different. But the experience of that practicum was useful in terms of me just thinking about what I want for my career and the kind of things that I want to work in.
Mm.
While at the same time, it also gave me a firm research experience. So,
Mm.
for example, what we did there was design a survey. Then we did field work, visited different villages, walked from house to house, interviewing people, collected that survey data, afterwards analyzed it, wrote a paper,
Mm.
published that paper. That was part of the agreement with our professor. We'll, at least send this paper in for review. And if we've done that, we've checked all our like deliverables, and that's what you will grade us for graduation on the basis of.
Okay.
So having that research experience was really useful towards my overall argument of, oh, please hire me. I have something to offer as a candidate, even if the specifics were
But
not.
different. Yeah.
But this was also kind of where having different things on my resume helped,
Okay.
where I had some experience working on things related to sustainable development.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, because I had 2 summers, my second summer, the internship that I did, was working for a company based in the US,
Mm-hmm.
looking to buy renewable energy on a sort of commercial basis.
Okay.
So that allowed me to get a little bit of a perspective of what it's like if you're, well, first of all, in the specific geography of the US, and what it's like to be like a commercial entity looking to buy energy, what are the challenges there, and so on. So I had a couple of different things that I could speak to. One that was really useful from the point of view of experience and saying that like I have ability to analyze, ability to work, and the other saying I have some context, market context,
Mm-hmm.
that would probably help me in the specific role I was applying for.
Correct. Correct. Yeah,
So
I
I would
think.
say diversity overall is the most helpful thing, especially if you
Okay.
wanted to switch what you're doing halfway through. I really thought I was very interested in sustainable development and so on. But halfway through, I realized that maybe this is not necessarily what I wanted to do. So having a diversity of things was helpful.
Right. I think it also depends on maybe the role that you're applying for and the company, whether being specialized will help you more or whether being, trying a few different things more or less related, but still with which will equip you with maybe a few different skills, right?
This
Instead
is
of
very true, because in my situation, it worked out where having a little bit of like contextual knowledge about like, okay, this is the US, this is clean energy, what bias thing, some of that helped. But it's definitely possible to get jobs on the argument of, hey, especially when you're like a fresh grad, to some extent employers understand that you cannot have worked on everything. There's simply no way you could know everything.
Okay.
So if you make the case for you being a smart learner, having some experience, showing a willingness to work, all those things are good enough. But when you're in the job search process, you don't know necessarily what someone's looking for. So there's a tendency to think, oh my gosh, they definitely rejected me because I didn't have that one thing in my resume. And you don't, and everything is justifiable in hindsight. So this worked out for me. There are many people for whom, it doesn't work out that way. They get luckier than I did.
Right. All right. A couple of final questions. One, again, that now that you've been at Bloomberg, in New York especially, from what you know, what kind of pay range can fresh master's graduates expect for a role similar to yours in Bloomberg or competitor companies?
So pay is a bit of a really it depends kind of
It
question.
depends, definitely. Yeah.
So what I would like to say is that a lot of the understanding of that people have when they graduate of what pay should be is to some extent set by tech, right? So you have a lot of engineers,
Yes.
especially from India, come do masters, they go work in tech companies, and in particular, those companies pay a lot. And so overall software tech jobs are the most spoken about numbers that you've heard. They're like opening 6-figure salaries and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not true for other fields. Even if you're working in a sort of like finance-allied, finance-y firm, like a lot of people mentally think of Bloomberg as like something to do with finance, even if they're not specifically sure what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's not, for entry-level roles, it's not necessarily a 6-figure salary. And this is even true when you adjust for the fact that the cost of living in New York is higher than potentially what you could be seeing in, other parts of the US. But this is just how it is, because I think, because if you're not necessarily trying to compete with like big tech companies that are willing to pay a lot for someone fresh out of a bachelor's degree, a lot more companies think of it as the fact that we have to essentially hire you and then train you and then so on. So over time, with experience, you manage to prove yourself.
And you also interviewed a lot of candidates. You've been on the recruiting side. So what do you think interviewers really want to hear, from candidates?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been involved in one or two processes to sort of interview people to hire for interns roles in my current team. And it's been really interesting to see like what it's like to be on the other side of the table. And the best way to describe it is like compared to what I thought going in, because when I thought going into interviews, what I really want to do is like highlight like, oh, I have all of these skills that are perfectly tailored and fit to your current job, your job opening. Here's all the stuff that I know. But while recruiting, I find that there's actually a mix of a couple of things you're looking for. Like, sure, you want to know that the person knows what they're talking about. But you also want to know that you also want to get a very strong sense of their personality. Like, are they going to be nice to work with? Are they going to be committed and to some extent sincere? Are they going to, get stressed out easily and so on? And especially when there's the understanding that you're hiring for slightly junior roles or somebody fresh out of college, the kind of mentality that I had, whereas I have to show them I know all of these things and they will judge me on content, is not that much what you're thinking of when you're interviewing. But like during my recruiting process, the most useful thing was practicing for interviews with an MBA student, because the way that they are taught to think about the entire job search, that process, the interview process, is just like
cutting
an
edge.
astronomical. Yeah, it's cutting edge, but it's an astronomical difference between how MS or even like MA, which was that economics degree that I did, which is how they are taught. They are taught like, oh, like we'll help you prepare for an interview and, here's your resume writing. But there's more of a researchy focus. But the kind of polish that MBA students are given is very different. And so practicing for interviews with such a student like really helped me, because they would like practice when they'd ask me a question and I would just talk about whatever I know, like, oh, I have done this and I have done that, and 5 minutes later they'd interrupt and be like, this is too long, nobody wants to hear this, stop.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like how to get to the point, how to explain your story overall is really helpful. Part of course, my problem was that I spent a lot of time applying for roles, but made it through to very few interviews. So there's a challenge
Okay.
of being an international student in the US,
Yeah.
visa sponsorship, that whole situation.
Mm.
But the few interviews that I made, it through too, I could tell like the real difference when you've put in time to practice with someone who knows how to give you that feedback. So if anyone's listening and they have a friendly MBA student who's willing to teach them stuff, that helps.
Yeah, I've worked with a few MBA candidates, especially a few have had some work experience. I spoke with them, and yeah, they I think the way they talk, maybe because of their training or probably because they practice, it's a little more polished, and it seems that they know what the other person wants to hear. And
Because part of it is they're trained to do exactly what you say, what the person wants to hear.
yeah,
Because in a way, they're taught to think of the fact that, like, look, here's a recruiter going to talk to a lot of candidates, make their life easy. Think about what do they want. So it's kind of like coming in with the,
yeah,
what are you looking for? You are looking for this. You're looking for a person who can work like a reliable person. I am that person. Let me get to the chase and explain
correct,
how I am that person for you.
correct.
So
To an extent, this is also what Bhuvan and I kind of spoke about in between about contributing to the role, the company. You think about that first, and then think about what you want from them afterwards. So it's about placing yourself as a giver first and as a taker later.
and in hindsight, this was where some of my networking efforts did not really work the way I didn't fully understand what are you supposed to do when you're networking. On one hand, you're supposed to
Okay.
just open your mind and learn about what roles exist, what do people do,
Hmm.
because it's a chance to hear stories and therefore learn, right? Because you can take classes, but you don't know what jobs people actually do. That's one.
Hmm.
But two is also to like talk to people from the point of view of this is what I have and how can I help you. Because sure, when you're in the panic of I'm about to graduate and I need to get a job, you're like, look, I applied to this
Hmm.
and I want to apply to this role. Here is what I need.
Yeah.
But taking a few moments to say, like, and because there were also times when it would feel very fake. Like, to me, my problems are front and center. And to spend some time saying, like, tell me how I can help you felt fake. I was like, surely they can see through me. They can see that I'm a student
Hmm.
about to graduate and they have an open role. So if whatever I say, they're going to see through this. But in reality, maybe that comes back to overthinking.
Probably. And in some of the earlier episodes, my guests bring up this whole kind of clouded concept of, networking in the US as
Yeah.
an international student, because there is a significant cultural aspect that you need to tap into to kind of, make that build that rapport with the other person. And of course it may not work with everybody, and that is why you go to events, you keep going to such events, and you keep meeting people. At some point it seems that it will click with somebody. And of course there are ways that you can make that happen a little quicker. But it seems that most people figure out what it is that, how to crack that small talk process and talking to people and kind of building up to the point that, to the point of talking business, basically.
By the time you crack it, you're really towards by the time you crack it, you're far and away gone from the time you should have known it and the opportunities you had to actually apply it. You know what I mean? Like you crack it by the time you finish your job search.
Which is exactly why I think, which is one of the objectives of me doing this podcast, is so that people like you who have recently gone through
Who
all
have made
this,
lots of dumb mistakes and have generally drifted through life,
yeah,
can tell people
can
don't do
avoid.
this.
Correct. Right.
I feel like with the networking though, it's really because there are so many silly moments that I remember now. because in our first semester, the university was like, so you guys are going to go for job search, la la la. We're going to help you write out a resume. So, okay, write out a resume. Maybe you need business cards. So they helped everybody print out business cards. Now I have 50 business cards with my name on them, and it says student masters. Okay, fine. What am I supposed to do? So I went to a career fair and I went to every table and I was like, oh, tell me about whatever it is. Okay, fine. So I talked to them. I found out what they do. And they're like, what are you interested in? Now, some of the things that they were doing were not related. Like there was, I think there were some people who were involved with like some watershed management, the Great Lakes, which are near Michigan and so on. Not related to what I do at all. I'm like, I'm interested in renewable energy. Now, I have asked them what they are interested in. I have told them what we are interested in. There's that 1 second where everybody knows that there is no connect. So now what do I do? I give them my business card and leave.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, probably that's not what you should do. It would save you time, it would save the other person some that moment of awkwardness also.
Yeah, but in hindsight, I could have some of the thinking that I could have applied, because you'd go to a job and you look at all of the companies that are there, or the firms who are like interested in having somebody come on for short-term work or something. And my first reaction would always be, is there anybody specifically related to the thing that I'm interested in working on? And most of the time there wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, what I could have done was look at the people who are offering something tangential or just like a useful experience. To say, okay, you know what, I'll work part-time. So that way I can at least say I have, some part-time work on the side. I've got more projects, and use that as a chance to talk to people.
Yeah.
And just, build a network from the point of view of not I want to get something, but I just know people and it's fine.
Okay, now the final question, which is what I ask everybody, and I like to end each episode with this, is what is your definition of success? Or rather, when would you consider yourself to be successful? And this is open-ended. It can be life, it can be career, whatever.
This is a really good question. So I think I don't have a clear definition of success, because I think, so for example, when I was in my bachelor's, I thought success was really vague. It was a vague sense of I'm doing something cool and useful. Like something cool and useful was like my definition of success. And over time, I would say like there are more metrics that tend to flesh that out, where I think we're taught to think of success as, are you making a lot of money? Do you have respect? Are you working for a respectable company? Is the title manager attached to your name? So all of these like metrics of respectability, money, and so on are attached to success. I'm happy about certain things that have happened, and I'm really glad. So, for example, I really like my job.
Yes, which is a great thing, actually.
Yeah. So when I got hired, I was like, wow, this is my dream job. And obviously there are like ups and downs over time where you're like, oh my God, I wish I didn't have to do this, or so on. But over time, my experience has really still been positive. I'm still hanging around here. The second thing I would say is what's been good is that I've had opportunities to build a certain level of network, I would say, as well as because this is a slightly client-facing role where and I'm also able to have a certain level of like ownership and put my name to things. So where I can say like, I made this analysis, here's a whatever forecast, and then I can go and explain it to people, and they're like, okay, so this is the person who's doing this at BNEF, and so there's a little bit of like recognizability, which I realize not a lot of roles have. So if you're in potentially another company where you're part of a larger team working towards the greater goal, it's a little harder to point to the final goal and say, this is what I did. And I definitely have a little bit of that, like a little bit of like ownership as well as some recognizability and a broader industry network, which is good. So that's been good. And I think lastly, I think success on a personal level, I am generally happy with like friends. I have a dog, which is not something that I thought I was ready for, but like now I have it, and I think that's like a good thing. I think people should have some sort of pet in their life, is even if you're not ready for it, it's a good experience. Yeah.
Brilliant, Tara. I think, considering that you switched fields and also now that renewable energy is a pretty booming industry all over the world. I mean, you can see what India and China are also doing. The developed world, for sure, is probably the place to learn from. So I think that a lot of people would find what you said very, very useful. So thank you so much for taking out the time once again. And yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please share this within your network and please subscribe to stay tuned. Thank you.